Okay, so I'm Angela Eckhoff. I'm new faculty in early childhood. This is my first year here. And Dr. Kersey asked me to come in and talk to you all about adoption and adoptive families and foster families so that you're ready for those kinds of kids in your classroom. And I talk about it because I have two adopted kids, and so now they're just my kids. But so just to give you a heads up on some of the big issues that come up, in particular during those years, pre-K to grade 6, there's a lot going on for kids that are dealing with adoption or that are in the foster care system. And teachers can make a huge difference in helping them have a nice, smooth transition. So did you put that link online that I gave you last time?
I think that I emailed it out to the people, but I can't.
So if you have that link, I sent you a link to this hands-on educator's guide, like kind of the 101s of adoption, right? And then it has a long section on what can educators do. So I'll just talk a little bit about that today. You can stop me at any time and ask questions. I don't know how much you know, and so I'm just going to throw it all out there. Okay, so please just stop and give a question. But really, this morning I read this article. It was in, I think, the New York Times, and it was talking about the percentage of failed adoptions. And for kids that are not babies, so that aren't adopted as infants, it's estimated that the number of failed adoptions is 1 out of 5. So that is a huge number of kids that join families and it doesn't work, and then they enter back into the system. And so it had a really good quote that I liked, that adoption's like a phoenix rising out of the ashes. It's never the life that we hope for a child when they are born, but when it works, it's wonderful. When it doesn't work, it's completely the opposite. It's that pile of ashes. So what we do know is that teachers can make a huge difference in the way that you approach a child's home situation. And so every kid's coming into your classroom with different kinds of baggage, right? We all have it. Yes. Some people have a truckload, some people just have a little carry. So thinking about how much baggage this child has and what they're dealing with on a daily basis is helpful. So I'm sure when you were kids, you can remember that the adoption teasing. So like if your brothers didn't like you, they would say, you're adopted, or that kind of stuff. So we have, as a society for a long time, looked at adoption as something wrong, right? Like if you're adopted, that's something wrong with you. And what we really know is that adoption is just another way that families are formed. But kids are going to be kids. And so kind of keeping your ears tuned out to listen to those kind of comments and thinking about how you can create a culture in your classroom where everybody is welcome and feels welcome every day. So the first thing that I would like to encourage you to use is to get up with the times in terms of like adoption lingo. So we don't say real mom and dad, we say birth parent and adoptive parents. I did it when I first came in. I said I had adopted sons. Adoption's a one-time thing. You're born one time and you're adopted one time. So it's not that you're adopted, like that's not the label that you have. It's just that's how you entered into whatever family you're in at the moment. So making sure that we don't preface that, just like we do with special needs. We don't say this is the ADHD kid. This is a child with ADHD. So we're putting the child first. So some families like birth mom, birth dad. Some families use names if they have them. So you kind of have to figure out what the child's used to using and use that. I should have started with this. It is never recommended now that kids are not told that they're adopted. Back when I was a kid, that did happen a lot. Like they just didn't mention it, and then they would tell you when you were old enough to handle it, which is like a complete, you think about how that would mess with your sense of identity, to be lied to for all that time. So we never do that. I don't think that you'll run into that situation anymore. It would be really unusual because social workers are very clear up front that kids need to be told their stories from the very beginning, and so we're not going to hide anything from them. Okay, so when we talk about families, adopted families are, just like every family. You'll have maybe kids from different races together in the family, so a multi-race family brought together through adoption, or we'll have adoptions that are within families, so it's my sister-in-law's child, but I'm adopting it and raising it as my own child. So you have different ways that family is formed. Some people like to call them blended families. It's really figuring out the terminology that the family feels most comfortable with. My sons, I don't like the birth mom, birth dad. It sounds clinical for little kids. So we either call them their name or we use another term. So they don't. That's just too much to process. Birth, adoption. So November is Adoption Month. And it's a great month for advocacy if you're interested in looking at bringing somebody in, an adult or somebody to talk about different ways that families are formed. But if really it's up to you, if you approach adoption as normal, as every day, then the kids are going to see it as normal as every day. I've had different experiences with my two boys and their teachers. Sometimes I'll get the vibe from a teacher that they think it's special in a way that's kind of something that they want to talk about, but that's not the way that we approach it. That's my boy's business. Like, I prefer you not to tell everyone unless they want you to. And it's not anything to pity. It's just, this is your life. And this is where you are right now. We're going to help you. And the way you do with every child, building self-esteem and self-confidence. So certainly you're never going to point out an adopted kid and use them as an example in your class. Like, so-and-so, and this happens all the time to adopted kids. Teachers will forget and mention something about it in front of the class. Nobody likes that, right? Nobody wants to be pointed out for whatever makes you different. So just don't do it. I'm surprised when I talk with other adopted families how often that happens to kids. So they'll use them as an example. So, oh, so-and-so, you're adopted, right? Or so-and-so, you were born in whatever country. Tell us about it. That's just not going to go well, okay? Then it also in here talks about making sure that you seek information from the child's parents. So it's helpful. A lot of adoptive parents will let you know at the start of a year that, and we are encouraged to do this, okay? So our social workers have told us this from the get-go. At the beginning of the year, just to drop you all a note and say, just so you know, this is his background, these are the things that we've dealt with, please come talk to me if you have any questions or concerns. Just like you probably will get that same information from your kids that have special needs or something like that, you'll certainly get your IEPs, but generally parents that have children with extra needs want to make sure that you are aware of those needs. And so adoptive kids deal with things called like reactive attachment disorder. So if they didn't form strong bonds in infancy, they have a hard time attaching to adults. And so they have a hard time with trust, and they may sometimes act out physically, or they may act out kind of socially. And so it's helpful for you to kind of know what they've dealt with in the past and where they're at right then at the moment. Earlier this year, one of my sons was really into the whole kind of shocking people. So he would say, he did this for months, he'd go up to adults and say, some babies don't have mamas. And the adults would say, oh no, that's not true. And he'd get mad. He was trying to, like, he's thinking about it in his head. And he's thinking, this is kind of interesting what happens when I say this to an adult. And they tell me no, and they are wrong. And I can tell them that they're wrong. So he did it constantly to people at the grocery store, to us, to his teacher. So it was helpful to have a little bit of an open dialogue with his teacher, so I could say, he's talking about it constantly. So you should know that it's probably going to come up, and it did come up in class. So that's part of that process of coming to terms with who you are. Then the other big piece for you to think about in terms of having kids in foster care or adoption that have been adopted in your classroom is curriculum. So we have traditionally done several assignments, pre-K to 6, that can be a challenge for adopted kids or kids in foster care. The first one is an autobiography, right? If you haven't grown up with a life of sunshine and roses, it's really challenging to write an autobiography and share it with relative strangers, okay? So we do that assignment because it's a nice way to get kids to start writing, and they should know their own story pretty well. But it's pretty invasive if you really think about it. If a lot of you took or are taking right now 690, that child in the family class, and you had to do a genogram where you share your family information, it's a little weird, right? And if I ask you then to write a text about, tell me your life history starting at birth, and there's things in there that you don't want to share, as an adult, you would just not share them, right? You make it up, you do something else. Kids feel like they are going to need to tell the truth. So you can think about how it would make you feel uncomfortable if you had to talk about all these things that you've been through in an autobiography. So you don't have to not do the assignment, but you could offer suggestions for kind of modifying it. They can pick the age that they start at, or they can choose to include some information and not other information. Or they could write, instead of an autobiography, let them write a biography of somebody else, right? So there's a way that you can still do that assignment without forcing them into like an uncomfortable situation. The other one is baby pictures, right? I've never understood this assignment. It has no purpose, right? But bring in your baby picture. We all want to see your baby picture. We'll put it up on the wall, and then we'll have another wall that says, look how we've changed, and we put up your current picture. A lot of kids don't have baby pictures, or they have baby pictures that they don't want to share. So thinking about, why would we do an assignment like this? What's the purpose of it? If there is no purpose, then we probably shouldn't do it. But if you're going to do it, you can think about letting them choose to do it or not do it, or choose any picture. So instead of a baby picture, choose a picture of yourself from the time you were born till now, and that's what you get to hang on the wall, okay? Have you guys seen that assignment? Mm-hmm. Yeah. So think about why it's there. My own boys, one of them I don't have photos of as an infant at all, and or they're like medical kind of photos. So those are not things that I don't think he'll take to school and be like, here, you all can take a look at this baby picture. It's not something that he's probably going to want to share. So then he has to make a decision. Does he do the assignment or not do the assignment? And then what are you going to do if he doesn't do the assignment? You're going to grade this kid, give him a 0 because he doesn't feel comfortable bringing in a baby picture? So you think about those kind of big issues. Certainly, the family tree is a big one, right? And we've all, you probably have seen like the alternative family trees too. So there's the regular family tree, which just assumes that everybody has a nice, neat timeline, where you have everybody has a mom and a dad, and there's the line that draws them together, and then you come out of that line. There's alternative family trees where we've got the kid as the trunk. You could have for adoptive or foster kids, you could have the birth family as the roots, and the limbs be the the adoptive family or foster families, fine, except that their tree's going to look different than others. So really thinking about why we do that. It's a nice way for kids to start thinking about genetics, but to be honest, in the United States, all of our families are fairly blended at this point in our history. So that study of genetics through your direct family tree can lead to misconceptions anyway, scientifically. Where did I get my blue eyes? Mom has brown eyes, Dad has brown eyes. Don't know Grandpa, but Grandma has brown eyes. That can be okay, so where did they come from? I have no idea, right? Or the same thing with like my boys that are of a different race. You could make them do that tree and ask those questions about genetics, but we don't know. So if you say, what's your hair color? What's mom's hair color? Maybe they're both brown, but you're reinforcing a misconception right there. So scientifically, that's not the best assignment to get the science content that you're trying to get. And it also can alienate a lot of kids. The timeline thing is a big assignment right now. I spend time in a parent advocacy group for adoptive families, and I write letters to teachers on their behalf, criticizing the assignments that you all give to them, because somebody has to do it. But the timeline one was big this fall. It's kind of like coming out of Facebook. So they'll have, they want the kids to say born, and then write the key events upwards, right? Okay. I don't know what your Facebook page looks like, but I did not write when I was born on my Facebook page, right? I left out a whole bunch of information, okay? The same thing, if you're going to do the timeline assignment, they should be able to decide when it starts, okay? So if they don't want to started when they were born, fine. If they want to only focus on the last 6 months, fine. But if you're going to make them have key events, so like when they were born, when they started school, who their first teacher was, those are some of the suggestions on one of the assignments that I looked at. Well, this one particular child was in foster care and had moved around so much that he didn't remember who his first teacher was, wasn't exactly sure when he started school, and he didn't have records of it. So in that case, the teacher actually graded him off for not including that information. But he just couldn't and didn't want to, hence the letter from me. So you don't want to get a letter from somebody like myself telling you that pedagogically is inappropriate, but it's also inappropriate on a whole nother level, just not being in tune with your students. So that timeline, I think, can be very effective in getting kids to think, in increments of time and all those important concepts, but really letting them have some leeway in terms of where it starts. Okay. Do you all start when you were born on your Facebook page? Okay. I'm just curious. Nobody my age does. Okay. We don't even write when we went to high school. Okay. Study of genetics, we talked about that a little bit. We don't want to reinforce misconceptions. Also a study of ethnicity. Most of the time, people use the terms race and ethnicity interchangeably. They're not the same thing. What's your definition of race?
Race seems more focused on the actual color of your skin, whereas like ethnicity, I think of like where you came from. Like, are you from India? Like,
where you came from, or where your people came from?
Yeah.
Okay.
Where your people
came from. So
nationality.
Right. Okay. So certainly race is the genetic traits, right? So skin color, hair type, all of those things. And when we use it interchangeably with ethnicity, we kind of assume the same things about people based on the color of their skin or their hair. Okay. Ethnicity can be very tricky for kids to understand because, frankly, okay, my great-grandparents came from Ireland. That is so far removed that I can't really, yes, we have celebrations related to being Irish in our family, but that's not really my identity, my ethnicity. It's really kind of Midwestern, born in the United States ethnicity, if you think about it in those terms. The same thing for a lot of adoptive kids that are born internationally. My boys were born internationally. They are not in any way, shape, or form being raised like they would if they were still in their birth countries, right? So you can say, when we check boxes, you know, that's their ethnicity, Asian, but they are being raised like they have two parents from the Midwest, okay, who are now out east, okay? So they celebrate, you know, being Irish, and certainly they also celebrate their Asian heritage, but it is not the same. So we have to think about what really makes sense. And in schools, we talk about kind of the tourist approach to holidays, where like it's Cinco de Mayo. So today we're going to eat tacos, have refried beans, and we're going to make sombreros, right? I've been to Mexico. I did not see a single person wearing a sombrero in Mexico. And their tacos were not the same as cafeteria tacos. So all we're doing with the tourist approach is reinforcing stereotypes about each other. And so thinking about how, if you're going to do a study of ethnicity, how are you going to make it meaningful? Okay, that's what kids walk away with, especially young kids walk away with the idea that people in Mexico wear sombreros, right? People in Ireland dance funny. You don't want to reinforce misconceptions. So you're going to try to avoid the tourist approach. If you're going to do it well. Really try to get the kids involved in the study of another culture, but you're not going to do it superficially. It's just going to bring misconceptions about, okay? Okay, a couple more things that you can do. Mother's Day, Father's Day, mother, son, mother, or dad, daughter events. We talk about this in my class a little bit. I don't like them. I don't think that there's a reason that you need to make Mother's Day presents in school, okay? Why do we do that? Why has that been something? Fathers get the shaft because it's the summer, okay? But why do we make those gifts in school? Why would you do it if you were a teacher? And I'll say I did it as a teacher before I knew better.
I was forced to.
Okay. Okay.
Maybe recognizing that the other parent may not be there to make a gift or get a gift for that parent or for that child's mother, or it might be something just the child feels like they have something to give to that parent.
Okay.
Dad's not going to buy mom a gift, or
okay. Is it my business, really, if dad doesn't buy mom a gift? It's Mother's Day. You could talk about we celebrate mothers in every culture. Okay, it's different days, but mothers are celebrated in every culture. So if it's coming up, we could talk about it, and you are fully capable as a child of getting out a piece of paper and writing your mom a note and making a lovely card all on your own. You don't need me to tell you what a Mother's Day present should look like and help you write a card in school. Because maybe you have two moms. Maybe grandma's your mom. Maybe it's your aunt. So it can be, those kind of assignments can be a little confusing for some kids, and they're kind of a narrow box. Maybe you do not have a mother figure in your life, right? So I think it's fine to talk to kids about that the holiday is coming up, right? And thinking about maybe you could do something special for somebody that's taking care of you. But I don't think it's my business to ask you to make a card. Okay. And then the other thing with mother, father, daughter, son events, it's a tricky thing because those were born out of a time period in the U.S. when we had pretty nuclear families, right? So I could make an assumption that if you had a father-daughter dance, that you had a father that was going to bring you to school and could do the dance with you. Now, when we look at the makeup of contemporary families, we know that that's not the case. So if what did we talk about the other day in class? You could have, what are you going to call it? you're going to do an event like that. Father, daughter, and just some man that can bring you to the. So really thinking about what's the purpose of it. If we just want to have a celebration at school, let's just have a celebration and you can bring whoever you want to it. But really thinking about why are we doing it, and is it keeping pace? Are those traditions keeping pace with contemporary families? They're really not, and so we should probably keep that in mind. Also, birthdays. For a lot of kids, their birthday is not the biggest, happiest day of their lives. Either they were born and that was the day that they lost contact with their birth family, or it brings back memories of birth parents and or other families that they lived with at that time. So being sensitive to that, and if they want to celebrate their birthday or have it be a special day at school, great. If it's not a special day to them, then maybe we won't make a big deal out of it. So just being mindful of the fact that for a lot of kids, that's a tough day. And so, how are you going to make sure that you keep that in mind? You probably could just have a conversation with every kid in your class as their birthdays are coming up about what special thing they'd like to do. Okay, well, a lot of adoptive and foster care kids have incomplete medical histories and that kind of thing, so that's a little bit outside of what to expect as a teacher, but it's just something to keep in mind. Then the last one that people always kind of roll their eyes at when I talk about this, we have a kind of trend in contemporary U.S. where we adopt a lot of things. Adopt a highway, adopt a pet, adopt a class, adopt a family. It's kind of cheapens the meaning of adoption when we adopt a portion of the highway to clean up. Or like in several of the schools they'll adopt the area around the school to clean up. If you are adopted, that's kind of weird if everybody's talking about, we're going to adopt this playground, we're going to clean it up and take care of it. We could just take care of it because it's a good thing to do. We don't need to have an adopt moment. So just being mindful of that advice comes from kids who are adopted, that they feel very uncomfortable when there's those kind of events. Because to them, it's this idea that other people know I'm adopted. Now we're constantly talking about adoption, and I feel like everybody's looking at me. Even if they're not, even if they don't remember that you were possibly adopted, if it makes kids uncomfortable, maybe we could just call it something else. Okay, so we could just clean up the playground, that type of thing. Okay, so that's about it. I mean, that's everything I said sounded pretty negative, like teachers are doing all this stuff wrong. But just things for you to keep in mind, and remember that you have such enormous potential for influencing the lives of the kids in your classroom for good or for not so good. So I, as a teacher, used to think about when these kids walk out of this classroom, what do I want them to remember about me? And I really did want them to remember certainly the concepts that we learned and all that good stuff, but also that I actually cared for the period of time that they were with me, and then on as they got older, I actually cared. And so the only way to do that is to build communication with your students. And you never know what kid is really going to need something from you as a teacher, something above and beyond just the teacher role. And that is part of being a teacher, understanding that kids are bringing in a lot of stuff into school. And if you can be there to help support them, school is often, for kids in foster care in particular, is often the most stable part of their lives. So that if they stay with you for a whole year, that's huge. You are going to be a long-term relationship to them. And so really thinking about how you can foster that and help support them. Yeah.
So for people that go in the preschool daycare route, a lot of schools require that you do things like the Mother's Day, Father's Day gifts. What do you suggest to do in those situations where you don't feel comfortable doing that?
I always have probably can't tell it about me, but I have a hard time when people tell me what to do, especially when I think it's not the best idea. So if in my mind, especially if it's not related to content, right? So if it's just some fluff that they want me to do, I have no problem saying, I don't feel comfortable doing that, but what we will do is, you know, talk about this special day coming up, and you know, that's what I'm going to do in my classroom. Now, if the reason they want to do that is because it makes parents happy, or administrators think it makes parents happy to see something like that. But really what makes parents happy is just the idea that you're taking great care of their kids, and that they're learning and growing in your care. And so there's no reason that you have to send home handprint butterflies or something like that. You could give them that idea that in the writing center or whatever area this week, if you'd like to work on writing a letter to your mom, I can help you do that. Or writing a letter to your dad or whoever. You know, that could be something that we can integrate in a meaningful way. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I'm not going to tell you just to go say no, because you know that doesn't go over well. But thinking about alternatives, so and really asking why do we think that this is important to do? Most of the time, people don't have a good answer.
Right.
So that's perfect, because that means then there's no real reason to do it if it's not going to be beneficial for every kid in your class.
That's what I was going to say. It was making me think that, you know, okay, a lot of us are getting ready to be going out into our student teaching and things like that. And,
Yeah.
and in order to, it's almost like, well, what do? You know, it's
Yeah.
like there's so many instances, I guess, in a lot of the different assignments that we do. You know, what do you recommend?
Mm-hmm.
You know, just the approach. What approach can we be having? But I think that
Yeah.
that kind of was.
Well, I
answering
think
it.
we have a long history in education of doing things just because we've always done them this way. So I would encourage you, with any assignment that you're doing, is to really think about, why am I doing this? Is there a better or more efficient way to do it? Is it important to do? I personally think all learning should be fun. So I don't really like the idea that sometimes we do super serious stuff and then we do some fluff on the side to make it fun for kids. The fun should be woven through everything we're doing. So we don't have to have like the Mother's Day project as the fun thing that we're doing. The whole day should be fun and engaging. Kids are, you know, that's thin. We all realize that that's a kind of thin approach to trying to make education interesting to kids. So really being a critical thinker about your curriculum and your approach to kids. Sometimes we do those things that aren't so great because they're easy. And most teachers won't admit that you're doing it just because it's easy. But if you really think about it, there's probably another way to do it and make your life even better, even easier than the way that we've been doing it in the past. What else?
Well, you have two Asian adopted boys?
Uh-huh.
And you adopted yourself?
No.
No?
No.
So,
Oh, am I adopted or my
yeah.
boys?
No, you adopted.
No.
Oh, I thought you was adopted because I was like, when were you going to share with them like your past experiences of being adopted?
That's a good question. My husband's mom is adopted, and they do know that. We talked about how when we started really just recently kind of talking about what that means and how people come into families in different ways, and we did talk about how their grandma and their aunt are adopted, and that it's a part of our family kind of line. And so it's I think that's kind of nice for them to see that it's part of a tradition, really, in our family. But then really getting them to think about other people's families. So my one son thinks that all kids are adopted right now at this point. He doesn't quite understand that some kids are not, and we haven't figured out how to explain it to him. But that's how they think families are formed, and so just thinking about, there's like developmental stages in coming to terms with something huge like that. And so they kind of tag onto different pieces of information at different times. But it's really not until adulthood that you process the entire kind of the enormity of the event, that circumstances led to a point that really had nothing to do with you. You were just there, and that those things came into being, and then this is what happened to you. Most people struggle with that up through adulthood. But really when kids are going through, if you think back through all those developmental stages you learned, when kids are kind of understanding permanency, and them understanding that others think things differently than themselves, that whole idea of perspective taking, it takes kids quite a long time to really understand that idea, that I was somewhere else and now I'm here. Or at this point in time, I was like this person, I'm not that person anymore, now I'm this person. It's a huge undertaking.
So like, did you know their biological parents?
What's that?
Did you know their biological parents?
No. No, neither. They both had. Both of their families had their rights terminated when they were young. So, and there's no history.
You don't let them study their own culture, even though
They do study we do a lot to get them to be connected to their cultures as much as we can. It's kind of. We really struggle with the idea that I don't want it to turn into the tourist approach, because most of the time, if you celebrate the holidays, so that's what they at this point in time recognize about their birth countries are just the holidays. So we try to find books and stories about their birth countries and talk to them about it, but it's really not going to be until they get older. And what we want to do is bring them back to where they were born, and so they can really see that and explore that as they get older. But right now it is a little bit of the tourist approach, just as a basis of their age. Because they both were born in different countries, we celebrate a ton of holidays at our house, and so I do get a little bit concerned that that's all they recognize is it's another holiday and we get to have cake or go to a different restaurant or something like that. So we've tried to bring in some music and things like that that they find interesting, and listen to their native language and that type of thing. But it's tricky. I think it's a really hard thing to do it and do it well. But we're hoping that they think it's more than just another cake. So.
Did they question that they looked different first, or did you tell them when they were, or when they were little, or how old were they?
Well, we don't look alike. But what's interesting, I was talking to a friend about this just recently. I have a good friend of mine who is Caucasian, and she married an African American guy, and so their children favor their dad. So, and she and I were talking about it as, I actually only see them as them. I don't ever really, I'm actually surprised when people say to me, oh, are they adopted, out of the blue, people that don't know, because I think, is it that obvious? I just look at, I look like their mama to them, they look like my kids. And so my friend was saying the exact same thing. She's surprised sometimes when she's out with her kids and they'll say, are you babysitting? She's like, who? These are my children, right? So it's just, from the perspective, when you're in that situation, you don't really think about it every day. Now they will as they get older and start wondering, who do I look like? What did my birth family look like? That's a normal part of kind of understanding who you are. But right now, what we do the kind of comparing each other, who has brown hair, who has different eyes. Right now, they act as if it's we're all look exactly the same. So, but I think that's something that will happen as they get older. But it's really an outside perspective. So I don't ever look at them and think, those children look nothing like me. I'm always surprised when somebody, so if on Facebook and I connect with somebody that I haven't seen in a long time, they'll say, who are those kids? I'm like, the kids that are with me in every picture, those are my kids. Why do you ask? So it always takes me aback when people do it.
That's what I was thinking too. I was thinking about the peers, like
Yeah.
that, because kids are, whether, I don't really think that they're trying to be intentionally mean, but they're, to them, if they've never, seen like an African American, and a Caucasian with their children, like you're saying, to them, then that's something that they're not expecting, I guess. And so I guess it's something that you have to.
Well, they ask it just like it's some
Figure.
part of clothing or something.
Right.
It's not.
Right. That's the beauty of kids.
Yeah.
Like, it's coming out of a place of innocence.
Mhm.
And I also think with a generation that you're going to start teaching, they are, families are different now, and you really have more of a mix of cultures and ethnicities and races and families, so that it's not just as shocking probably as it was back in the day when I was in school, right? It's kind of expected. And kids are pretty open, especially at younger ages. Okay.
All right. Well, thank you. We're
You're
very
welcome.
glad to have your insight and input.